So you want to get straight to the show. So you want to know what you need to know. You want to know what we're all here for. Well, you better get hip to Podcast by George. Podcast by George. Podcast by George. He knows what he's fighting for. It's Podcast by George. Podcast by George. Want to know what we're fighting for?
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome to a podcast by George. We've got the doc back in the house. He's making another house call to the podcast by George audience. And, the reason is we're coming down to the deadline here, down to the wire for the presidential election. The general election is coming up. We've got some interesting races here in the state of Iowa on the legislative level as well. But wanted to talk primarily about Donald Trump like we have in the past because it's the... I don't know. Some people would call it the head of the snake. Don't want to offend my Republican friends, but I mean, that's kind of where we got to start. And of course, it was big news worldwide, nationwide, certainly, because he was here in the Big D. He was in Des Moines yesterday, flew in, got out of the plane, was swept in front of a large audience there. Interestingly enough, Doc, and by the way, welcome to a podcast by George. I noticed, I don't know if you caught this or not, looking at the people behind him, a lot of those folks are wearing masks now. I thought that was interesting. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a red alert alarm going off in the Republican establishment and in the campaign organization saying, hey, people want people to wear masks, and we just can't continue to pretend like President Trump has done, that masks are Democrat, that they're liberal, that they're weaknesses. And so let's stick some masks out there. I mean, it's all theater. Those people didn't want to wear those masks. You know that. It
is theater. I also wondered whether or not it was the fact that they all had logos on them. They were given to them. I'm sure they all had MAGA logos and stuff. Maybe that encouraged some of them to wear it.
They all had different signs. Latinos for Trump.
Yes.
Women for Trump. Blacks for Trump. Farmers for Trump. It's all theater. And Americans, I think understand that you can't really believe what you see or hear because it's all orchestrated. And there is an avalanche of money that unprecedented in American history. Joe Biden is lucky; he's getting the avalanche.
Yeah, he's got the money.
Massive amounts of money. Like $300 million for this or that. And so, I don't know if that's the way democracies are supposed to work, or that's what elections were meant to be. I liked it a little better when they got on a train, as we talked about, and stood on the platform in the back of the train and waved at people and gave a little speech as the train went from one town to another. But I guess that was then. So now we're in the era of massive amounts of social media advertising. I mean, I was looking this morning at what the Biden campaign is doing. They're just buying every minute, every split second of TV and also social media, and targeting with very good ads, I must add. They're well produced and so on, to these key states that the Democrats are a little bit optimistic. They think they can flip away from Trump to Biden. And as you said, Iowa is back in the game again with Trump and Biden tied. Trump won Iowa, of course, by a substantial amount. And so Iowa is a swing state. It goes back and forth, and it's still a little bit purple. So that makes it more interesting.
Well, the Democratic Party has become the party of militarism, which is surprising to me, witnessed by that recent vote that I've been raising hell about to reduce the military spending and get out of Afghanistan. They voted against that, shockingly. Joe Biden is the big money candidate of the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi is the biggest fundraiser. 100 millionaires heading the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. Joe Biden announced his candidacy not in front of 20,000 adoring fans like somebody like Bernie Sanders would have. He was in the mansion of the CEO of Comcast, was where he kicked off his campaign. He's out of Delaware. Delaware has the highest per capita amount of money of Fortune 500 companies in the country. That's where he's going to be today, is in Wilmington, ahead of these town halls that they're going to have tonight. So money rules the day, and like the doc says, that ain't the way that it was supposed to be. It's supposed to be one person, one vote. Isn't supposed to matter how much money that you have. The worst thing happening, of course, is that damn Electoral College, which rewards landowners and everybody says slave owners from back in the day. That's not the way that this is supposed to run today, but that's how we got Donald Trump. Well, I wanted to get this article up from the hometown paper because Trump was in Des Moines, as we mentioned. Let's see if we can get this up on the screen right off the beginning, and I've mentioned this on my podcast before. Headlines in particular are all important. People just kind of blow them off, but the point of it is most people only read the headlines. We scan the news. Everybody does it. I do it. The doc does it. Everybody does it. Headlines are all important. Now look at this headline in the Des Moines Register. President Donald Trump praises foreign leaders while knocking Joe Biden's mental acuity at Des Moines rally. And I looked at that and I thought, well, that damn Trump, he's doing it again. He's praising the Russians. I mean, he's praising China, which of course are his main criticisms here in this campaign. That's kind of what they want you to think. But I look at, okay, so let's scroll down here a little bit, and it's not quite what you think it is. President Donald Trump praised the mental acuity of the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea at a rally in Des Moines Wednesday, arguing that his opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden, is not as smart. Okay, was he really praising those people? What he said was President Xi of China, 100%. Putin of Russia, 100%. Kim Jong-un of North Korea, 100%. Well, I guess if that's praise, saying that those people have 100% of their mental faculties. He says these people are sharp and they're smart. Joe's lost it in his best days. He wasn't a smart man, and everybody knows it. Well, okay. I mean, I'm not here to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt, but that's not exactly what I thought this article was going to be about as I read into it a little deeper.
Right.
Trump.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I mean, why is that something that you want to tell your loving and adoring audience that's supporting you? Is that really going to connect with them? Is that going to make them love you more? Or is that a, kind of off-putting? I mean, those people, those are in some cases in Kim Jong-un. I mean, they're brutal dictators. And China has got 1 million Muslims in massive prison camps that are, horrible places. And Putin sends around guys with poison to poison his political opponents. I mean, if I was Trump, maybe he's got a reason for doing it, which I don't understand. But talk about Iowa farmers. Talk about, the derecho and the damage that it did. Talk about unfair trade policies by China and how he's trying to improve those so that Iowans can export more of their products to China and other places. That's what people want to hear. And talk a little bit more about how much money you and the federal government have put into research and into funding vaccines, which they have put in massive amounts of money. And those are all things that are positive. Talking about a bunch of dictators being really smart guys. I mean, might as well throw in, the leader of Iran, and some dictator in Africa. And you got the complete team of really despicable people. I don't get it,
Well, again, I'm not here to defend those people. The only thing I can say is sometimes they're opening themselves to their own criticism when they do that. As we've talked about on this podcast, Doc, we have the largest per capita prison population in the world. You want to criticize China, and they're open to criticism. I mean, what they're doing to that Muslim population is brutal. 70% of our prison population here in the United States is black and Latinos. Yeah, Russians, it looks like they poisoned some people over there. My God, Flint still doesn't have clean drinking water. We poisoned the kids of Flint, and then the former governor that was in office and has been accused, and some people want to arrest the dude for what he did to Flint, Michigan, came out and endorsed Joe Biden. And of course, it's on both sides of the ledger. Doc talked about that. These these candidates, these parties, instead of offering something to attract these uncommitted voters, what they're doing is they're dancing on a razor's edge with our futures, and they've decided to out-hate the other side. Trump is trying to out-hate Biden. Biden, when you see him speak, he's not talking about policies and programs, not in a coherent way that anybody can understand. What he's talking about is hating on Donald Trump. They're trying to get their side to out-hate the other side in the general election and win by a few thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of votes, with 90 million plus people sitting on the sidelines refusing to vote. Well, here I wanted to get this back up here again. I wanted to talk about a little deeper into this article now. See if I can get this up. Okay, so this is what Doc was talking about. As Trump began to speak yesterday, he turned almost immediately to his place in the polls. He cited a poll by Focus on Rural America that showed him leading Biden by 6 percentage points. Well, as Doc says, it's basically a toss-up. There's a 6 percentage point margin of error in that poll. But here's what I wanted the Doc to talk about. Trump said, "I saved ethanol. Ethanol is safe," promising Iowa's farmers and biofuels industry that he's the only one who will deliver for them. Now, Doc, I know you've kind of got an ear towards this ethanol industry. You've talked on the podcast about it before. A lot of those people are really frosted at Donald Trump because of what he did with ethanol.
Well, I mean, this is a late conversion, from a satanic position on ethanol, which was to basically continue to give deferments to the petroleum industry so they didn't have to blend for the Renewable Fuel Act, which cost the ethanol industry billions of dollars. Now, at the end of this campaign where President Trump is not doing very well and he's tied in Iowa, they suddenly went after the petroleum industry and said, "No, we're not going to." We're not going to let you basically skip out of the ethanol when you blend your fuels. So, the interesting thing is my neighbors, my farmer friends, they still like Trump. Okay, they still like Trump because they have a bunch of other issues that they are concerned about. They like the, I think, Supreme Court nomination and swinging the Supreme Court now definitively to the right. And so that is, in addition to ethanol and exports and tariffs and all the other things, something that people consider when they decide who to vote for. They're not going to vote for Biden probably. But, the polls closing in Iowa show that there are large numbers of people in Iowa who have decided that maybe this time they're going to not vote for President Trump. There you go. It's a complex thing, and as you said, American elections are always razor thin. They're always about a few thousand people here or there switching. That's the system that we inherited in the Constitution. And someone pretty smart I saw said, is it really smart for the Republicans to quick swing the court all the way to the right? Because then people who want a conservative court are not as motivated to vote for Trump again. If they've got the court, and I don't know, but it's a sad thing. And my friends in Europe and Latin America just don't understand how the Supreme Court, which should be an objective, monitor of what's constitutional and what's legal and what isn't, and be a referee, is such a political structure and such a political institution. They don't understand it. And so, that I think is in addition to the Electoral College, which skews the results of an election always to states with smaller populations, because each state gets a certain number of votes and big cities generally are underrepresented there. The Supreme Court is the other kind of enigma. it is it draws too much attention during elections, and abortion draws way too much attention of the attention that the Supreme Court gets. Because almost always when there are nominations, whether it's a Democrat nominating someone, Republican, it's how is that justice going to vote on Roe v. Wade? And
right.
That's just too much concentration on a single issue, which, though important to many people, is I think a distortion.
Well, Nancy Pelosi doesn't come out of the weeds and talk extemporaneously very often, and with good reason. If you've seen her recently, and if you saw that Wolf Blitzer interview, you'll know what I'm talking about. But she was on a podcast here just over the past couple of weeks and said basically Roe v. Wade is kind of like a red herring. It's something that the Republicans use, and they bring it up all the time, but they've never pursued it. They've never acted upon it. I look at the ACA now with the discussions that they're having with the Barrett confirmation hearings, same kind of thing. They want to talk about those things, and it's like a gold watch spinning in front of the American electorate. They're not talking about war crimes and emollients clauses and COVID responses and these killer sanctions around the world and climate change and this prison population and broken judicial system that we've been talking about. Those things aren't coming up. It's all of this spinning watch stuff that really never ever comes to pass, and it's just a means of distracting us, I think.
You're talking about hypnotism?
Yes.
Is that the spinning watch?
Exactly.
You're feeling sleepy.
Yes. And they put us to sleep. And by the way, that's my number one concern if Joe Biden gets elected, is that the left, the liberals or progressives or whatever is left of us, will go to sleep and say, well, we got a Democrat elected. No, this time, particularly because of the climate, we can't go to sleep. Well, we're limited on time, and I got to get to this next thing. I'm going to bring this next article up here that I wanted the doc to comment on. And this is out of the USA Today. And this is something that we've talked about on the podcast before. But the headline, more than 1 million people could lose their vote November 3rd. That's the best case scenario. And I get this. In a normal election year in any given state, hundreds or even thousands of absentee ballots get tossed for everything from late postmarks to open envelopes. North Carolina rejected 546 ballots for missing witness signatures in the 2012 presidential race. Virginia tossed 216 ballots in the 2018 midterms because they arrived in unofficial envelopes. And again, that doesn't sound like much, but we're talking about razor's edge elections, folks. Arizona discarded 1,516 ballots for non-matching signatures the same year. The 2020 presidential election will not be normal. Absentee ballot rejections this November are projected to reach historic levels, risking widespread disenfranchisement of minority voters and the credibility of election results. A USA Today, Columbia Journalism Investigations, and PBS series Frontline Investigation found. At least 1.03 million absentee ballots could be tossed if half of the nation votes by mail. Discarded votes jump to 1.55 million if 75% of the country votes absentee. And in the latter scenario, more than 185,000 votes could be lost in Florida, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, states considered key to capturing the White House. Well, that ain't considered to be key, folks. That is the key, and it's because the popular vote, as we found out in 2016, doesn't make a tinker's damn bit of difference. It's all about the Electoral College, and those states could swing on these discarded votes. Doc, you've talked about mail-in voting and the situation that we're at with these voting machines, and my God almighty, in the greatest nation that the country and the world has ever seen, here we sit, we can't count our own ballots, we can't trust our own election.
No, it's daunting, and I when you send in an absentee ballot, the first thing, it goes to a screening place where I saw that this morning on a report. They look at the signature and your signature from another document, and if they don't match, they hold the ballot. And if they can't rectify that, they never forward it to anywhere. Now, let me ask you a question. I still have to sign in a lot of grocery stores sometimes, or a laundry or whatever. And my signature is never the same because I'm in a hurry. I don't want to write my full signature the way Donald Trump does, carefully take about 10 minutes to sign.
Yeah.
I go scribble, boom, and that's all they want. And we have become, I think, a country where the signature on things is less and less required. And so a lot of people just scribble something and don't realize that in this particular case, the signature is crucial to whether your ballot goes on. So what are we doing? We're going backwards in the sense because we're making disqualifying voters a greater risk by having absentee ballots, whereas we thought it was progress because it would allow people easier access to voting, because older people and people who work and other people, they love absentee ballots. It's just really a tragedy. And what we do is we put up with it. Most Americans don't vote. In the 2016 election, when I just gave a big talk to the North Dakota bankers. Yes, the North Dakota bankers on Zoom. It was something else, another platform. And I have a map of the United States that shows all the states in different colors. If somebody by the name of did not vote, Mary did not vote as a last name, had been running, she would have won overwhelmingly in 2016.
Yes.
And that map is all gray where people, a majority of voters didn't vote. And it's only a few states, and Iowa is one of them, where more people voted, that are eligible, but still not a huge number. So we're a country that has a periodic tool for selecting our leaders, and we don't use it much. And we have not done a very good job educating people. Number two, when people do try to vote, we screw them with, all kinds of funky monkey things, drawing the district lines so that you put all the people of one party together and therefore their vote is diluted, disqualifying people, having people who serve time in jail and should have their voting rights restored, not getting them restored. So you have a lot of people who really qualify legally to vote, but they haven't been processed because, there are benefits in not letting people vote. There are benefits to certain parties in certain places. And, we need to work on that, frankly. I mean, I know the founders of this country are flipping in their graves when they realize, how much money there is, how much we do voter repression or suppression. Venezuela does that, but we don't want to be like Venezuela. But we are approaching making elections be dubious and having people lose their faith in election. As soon as that happens, it opens up a whole can of worms for how leaders behave, and democracy gets really rusty and diminished when that happens. And I know a lot of people who are politically active, and they're not that interested in this issue. Not that interested. It's other things. Like you said, climate change, which is important. Renewable energy and solar wind power and, human rights and Black Lives Matter and all those things. By the time you're done with that list, George, there isn't time to say, okay, now let's talk about how we can improve our electoral system and make sure that these three companies that provide highly flawed voting machines, fix that, or their CEOs get thrown in jail. Because basically the people who make those voting machines, which are so flawed, are the biggest threat to our democracy, bigger than terrorism. But we don't care.
And we don't care.
The idea is go down, to the liquor store and buy another case of beer. Let's all get together and violate the mask and close contact rules that are being put in place. You look at what's happening across the country. People are not paying attention to the law. They're actively defying it, in fact. And the governor, I'm in Rhode Island right now. The governor of Rhode Island, is frantic because people are congregating and passing it on to each other. And then they asked her, well, are you going to go after them? Are you going to send the cop? And she said, no, I don't think we're going to do that. Well, as I said, if you drive 90 miles an hour on Interstate 35 between Des Moines and Iowa and Ames, and there's not a chance that a cop will stop you and give you a big ticket, you're going to drive 95,
Sure.
and so,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are saying you can't really have this lack of, getting together in restaurants and other things because it's going to destroy the economy. And people are social animals. People want to be with their relatives. They want to go to a big wedding. Why have a wedding if you can't have your whole family there coming flying in from all over the country? Well, because, that spreads potentially, and in many cases spread huge numbers of cases. And people are saying, well, I don't care. So herd immunity, where we all get this virus, and some of us don't ever get sick. Some of us get sick, but it's not much, like Donald Trump's son apparently, was positive, but he never really was very sick. Number 3, you get sick and you go to the hospital and they treat you and you're fine, you go home. Number 4, you die. There's this whole idea that we don't have a vaccine, we really won't have one for a while. So let's let everybody get the virus, and then that means the virus has no place to go. And so it just, I guess, goes to sleep and disappears. A lot of people, more and more people that I hear and read about are saying that's what we should be doing.
Well, and the next virus is probably in queue. That's something else. And we're going to have
Oh my God.
Andrew Nish, our doctor, our head of the medical center, John Stoddard, on here very shortly to talk more about COVID. He's our regular guest on that.
Yes, and
folks, we've been talking.
That's scary stuff. Scary stuff.
Yes,
to think
it is.
that we have a queue. The next virus is waiting somewhere. And we've had pandemics before. We will have pandemics in the future. This virus is particularly nasty. Others, have not so much. We were able to control them and create a vaccine quickly. You think about polio. Oh my gosh, polio was a horrible, horrible disease. And fortunately, some really, really smart doctors were able to create a vaccine and quickly make a vaccine that's given to people all over the world. So polio is just about extinct, except in a few places where they don't trust vaccines. This one here, we're having, we're apparently making some progress. I don't want to be completely negative and depressed about it, but it's an ever-ending battle, ever-ending. And those of you who don't like government have to understand the only one who's going to put in a huge amount of money to create a vaccine is the government. I mean, private pharmaceutical companies are going to create all kinds of designer drugs that are hugely expensive, that apply to a small number of people, or male enhancement drugs, which, you can buy the little blue pill, I guess. But vaccines, they don't want to invest a huge amount of money in vaccines because in many cases, there's no profit at the other end. So the only one who can really stimulate vaccine research and create vaccines is government. And if you don't like government, well, get out of the way, because
that's what I want my government. That's what I want my government to do. I want my government to protect me. I want them to keep me well, and I don't want them doing what our government spends all of its money doing today. And Doc, as we head into the general election here, I got to tell you, my back, my spirit has been broken. My back hasn't been broken yet when it comes to the political environment. Stephen W. Schmidt has been a professor for 50 years looking at this political scene. I've been telling people, I had my head down. I was in the corporate world. I was not paying that close attention to what was going on in the United States, around the world. I retired and I started to look at these things. And Doc, and we've talked about this on the list before, 80% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. Really? Yeah. 63% of Americans before the pandemic couldn't afford a $500 emergency. They've probably blown through that $500, folks. 30 million people didn't have health care prior to the pandemic. Millions have been added to that. We were involved in 7 wars. Hell, I didn't even know that when Donald Trump took office. These are all things that Trump actually, not to his credit again, because he's exacerbated a lot of these things, most notably the climate catastrophe. Trump has done us no favors. But all of these things existed before Donald Trump. But we got to get him out of there so that we can address this climate issue first and foremost. And then, I'm all for these other things. I mean, we got to take action, direct action, to get Biden to move where we need him to go. I'd like to see ranked choice voting. Doc and I have talked about that. The Movement for a People's Party. Check that out online with Nick Brana. He's a Bernie Sanders expatriate. That's an excellent organization. I'm a big third-party supporter. I'd love to see unions get active again, get rid of their corruption and their corporatism. I don't know if that's going to happen again. Strikes may be a part of the solution as we move ahead here, but we've got to do stuff like we have not done before. I think Joe Biden's going to get elected, but if he does, my call is don't go to sleep like we did before, or we're all going to go to the big sleep. Doc, I got to let you go. I got to wrap up here today. Well, just give us a closing thought here to send us on our way, and we'll double check. We'll get back with you here again before the general.
Well, I mean, I really think that the election itself may produce definitive results, and there won't be a big controversy over who actually won. There will be violence, but I think the authorities in this country, regardless of whether they side with one party or another, really do not want an attrition of law order, and not in the sense of law and order with a lot of police beating up people, but stability, because once you break the stability, then you have to bring in massive force, and then other sides arm themselves, and you get basically social disruption. So I'm hoping that the election will be definitive enough, and that regardless of who wins, we'll say, yeah, it looks like I won or I lost, and let's move on. I really still think we can do that.
I hope so.
I'm going to go get a beer.
Let's leave it there for now. Yeah. Well, like I've just told people, I said, hold your nose and grab your toes and vote for Joe Biden, and get on him immediately about this climate change thing, and let's move ahead. Let's not go backwards any further. God, it is too late for that. Folks, that's Dr. Stephen W. Schmidt, the Lucan Endowed Professor of Political Science from Iowa State University, a frequent guest of ours on Podcast by George, and we're just delighted to have him on. Doc, thanks again for coming on.
It's excellent always being on with you. I learn a lot from you.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope that's a good thing. And folks, if you like the podcast, please go to podcastbygeorge.com, pick a platform that you'd like to subscribe on, and do it so that you get each and every episode. And in particular, watch the videos on YouTube. Subscribe there, because I put a lot of work into those. Audio's available everywhere, of course, including on iTunes and Spotify and the iHeartRadio app. But please watch the videos on YouTube and Facebook. But that's going to do it for now. That's going to wrap it up. That's another podcast by George.